Well, Captain, we're just about at our halfway point. It's been a pretty smooth and uneventful flight so far.
Indeed it has, Brian, but something has just occurred to me. Now, I don't want you to be alarmed, but I'm not really sure we're going to be able to land this airplane.
What is it, Captain? Is something wrong? Should we declare an emergency?
Not quite yet. It's just that it's occurred to me that for whatever distance we have left on our journey, we're always going to have to travel halfway there before we get there. Meaning there will always be half the distance still left to travel.
Excuse me, Captain? I can't say I recall ever going over this one at flight school.
No, this is something you can't train for in the simulator, Brian. Now, up here in the air, it might not seem like that big of a deal, but just think of when we're an inch above the runway. We'll first have to descend half an inch, leaving another half inch between us and the ground. From that half inch, we would have to drop another quarter inch before we travel the whole half inch, leaving the other quarter of an inch still between us and the runway. No matter how far we descend, we'll always have half of that distance left between us and the ground. Logically, we'll never be able to put the plane all the way down. Do you understand my reason to be alarmed, Brian?
That sounds like a pretty serious issue, Captain. What do you suppose we do? We won't be able to stay up here forever. We only have another couple hours of fuel left in the tanks.
Well, I'm not really worried about it, Brian. Because no matter how much fuel we burn through, we'll always have half of it left. Even if we are down to our absolute last gallon, we'll first have to use half of it, leaving half of it still in the tanks.
But what happens if we use that last half gallon?
Well, you'd first have to use a quarter gallon, leaving another quarter gallon. Then before you use that quarter, you'd first have to use an eighth of a gallon, leaving another eighth in the tanks, and so on. No matter how small the number left, it'll never get to zero.
Well, thank God, Captain. I'd never thought about it like that. But, what do you suppose we do about the passengers? They're not going to want to stay up here forever. Eventually we're going to run out of food and beverages.
Well, you'd think that, Brian, but I'm pretty confident that that really won't be a problem either. Now imagine one of their dinner plates. Before they can eat all the food on it, they'll first have to eat half of it, leaving half of it still to be eaten. Then before they can eat the other half, they'll have to eat half of that. And no matter how much food they eat, they'll always have half of it left on the plate. And they'll never actually be able to finish their dinners.
Well, that's a relief, Captain. But, what's going to happen when their film ends? They're going to be pretty bored flying around up here forever with nothing to be entertained by.
Well, I don't think we really have to worry about that either, Brian.
Because no matter how much of the film is left, there will always be half of that remaining, and they'll never actually be able to finish the movie?
No, Brian. It's because when the film ends, we can just start it back over at the beginning.